killing, bombing, killing civilians, this is forbidden in Islam. Quran clearly says in one verse, in Surah An-Nisa, the fourth verse is called, the chapter is called The Woman, in the 29th verse, God gives us a command. It's really simple. It's 3 words. Don't kill yourselves. Don't kill yourselves. There's another saying in the Hadith Qudsi. This is a saying where it's not like the Quran, but it's close in importance, where Prophet Muhammad said certain things that God narrated to him or said to him that are not in the Quran. And he spoke very specifically of a man who tried to play God by taking his own life, that he would be condemned to the hellfire for his act of suicide. So suicide is clearly forbidden in Islam. Now, if you look at statistics in regards to suicide bombings, and I mentioned Dr. Robert Pape, in his database of suicide bombings, you will see that out of that time frame, the most prolific, the most accurate, the most successful suicide terrorists in the world were a group that just disbanded a few months ago called the Tamil Tigers. Where are the Tamil Tigers located? Sri Lanka. What are most of the people's religions in the Tamil Tigers? Hindus. What is their political philosophy? A type of neo-Marxism, socialism. Tamil Tigers. This has been documented. Even if you go to the, including the tragedy of 9/11 in regards to terrorism, if you go to the FBI's own website, they did a study of data on domestic terrorism, people who commit acts of terrorism in America, including there were no suicide attacks except for one during this time frame. But of all the domestic terrorism attacks in America from 1980 to 2005, Muslims only made up 6% of terrorism attacks in America from 1980 to 2005. Jewish extremists made up 7%. The majority of those would be classified as leftist or left-wing suicide, or not suicide, left-wing terrorists, like eco-terrorists, for example. There are also right-wing terrorists. Or like how the media has failed to label this guy, Joseph Stack, as a terrorist. What that man committed was an act of terrorism. You know, last week in Austin, Texas, the guy that talked against the government and against the IRS, and then he jumped into an airplane, flew the airplane right into the building where the IRS was at. And some people, by the way, are calling him a hero, including his daughter. Nonetheless, what this man did, he targeted civilians, he had a political grievance, and he flew an airplane into a building. He killed himself. This is terrorism. I don't know why, that's for another discussion, but I don't know why our government and the media have been so scared to label this an act of terrorism. But I have a feeling why. Such acts as the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, these acts fall under terrorism. Also, what people such as in Pakistan, who would take a bomb and go into a mosque and blow themselves up during Friday prayer, or go into markets, these people are undoubtedly terrorists. Another statistic for you, I gave you some information in terms of the Tamil Tigers and how they were very effective in the most notorious suicide bombing organization. And I also gave you the FBI statistics you can find on the FBI's website. It's also an important statistic for you to understand that worldwide, guess who are the #1 victims of terrorism? Muslims. Muslims are the #1 victims of terrorism in the world. Every time you turn on the TV and you see a suicide bombing or attack in Islamabad or Karachi or in Afghanistan or in Iraq or in Somalia, these people who are strapping bombs on themselves or putting bombs in cars, they're not targeting Jewish people. They're not targeting Christians. They're targeting people who are Muslims. And they're doing these things to meet their own political objectives. So this is something else people say, well, how come the Muslims aren't against terrorism? Well, we've been denouncing terrorism and since we've been blue in the face. But for those people who haven't heard it, how many of you all saw the press conference where I called about Captain Underpants? Any of you all see me on TV? You see what I'm saying? None of you saw me on CNN or on the local news. When the guy did the Christmas Day bombing. Wow. You did. Okay, mashallah. The sister saw it. How many of you saw the press conference we gave when Jill Carroll, the Ann Arbor journalist, was taken hostage in Iraq? A few more of you saw that. We've been denouncing terrorism and on record for denouncing terrorism long before 9/11. Not just because we're Americans and trying to cover our behinds, but because one, it's against our religion, but two, we have been traditionally the #1 victims of terror. Even during 9/11, the tragedy of the World Trade Center, hundreds of Muslims died. Non-Muslims were in that building in the Twin Towers, whether you realize that or not. So we have been victims of different types of terrorism. Now, whether it is an individual, I said this before, I'm going to reiterate it. Whether it's an individual, if it's a political or quasi-religious group, or a nation state, any state that any one of these groups that deliberately targets civilians and tries to kill them, these are all acts of terrorism. Some people try to dress them up and say that certain states commit acts of terrorism while other states commit war crimes. Nonetheless, if you look at the definition of terrorism, none the same, these are all acts of terrorism. Forget the labels that say A plus B equals C. Doesn't matter what the name of the group is or what the nation is. These are all according to the textbook dictionary, the textbook dictionary definition of terrorism, and according to our understanding of Muslims, these are all terrorism nonetheless. Now, I will make one other point in regards to jihad, because I mentioned the jihad of self-defense. I would like to also mention another form of jihad. There are many forms of jihad. There's a jihad of getting knowledge. This is the type of form of jihad. There's a jihad of fighting one's lower self and fighting or struggling against sin. This is a form of jihad. Like brothers, like when the nice sister sends you the Facebook message, sends you the IM, why don't you come by and see me at my apartment? And she's looking good and you're single, right? But then you say, I can't do that because I'm not supposed to be going to see this sister at midnight. And she has this apartment by herself, or her roommate is on vacation in Florida. That's like what jihad too. Right, brothers? Right. Okay. But there's also the jihad in regards to liberating the oppressed. If a group of oppressed people come to a Muslim leader, to like a head of a state, or to the Muslims,